One of the critical parts of being a great team is quite obviously communication and collaboration. And many books have been written about both these subjects, and we could go on forever with everything there is to know about communication and collaboration. But what I want to focus on are the techniques that you need to have a dynamic discourse conversation. You know, what is critical to have that kind of conversation where you're able to share ideas and create a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. But first, let me define a key difference between communication and collaboration. Communication I consider to be those techniques you use to enhance your ability to communicate with those that are within your sphere of influence. That means people on your own team, people in your, maybe even in your own division, maybe even people in your own company. Collaboration is when you reach outside of your sphere of influence to get new ideas that can better whatever you're doing within your sphere of influence. So first, let's focus on communication. And there's two techniques that are critical for good communication, which almost none of us do. And I want you to think about, for a moment, when somebody is talking to you, what is going through your brain? And if you're like most of us, as they're talking, you're already relating what they're saying to your own experiences. And if it's something that perhaps you don't agree with, you're already thinking of reasons to rebut what they're saying. Or maybe something they said caused an emotional reaction in you, and so you're getting upset. Or it stimulated you, so you're getting excited. But one important critical fact that is missed in these types of communications is actually understanding what the other person is saying. And I know for a fact that if I'm talking to somebody about anything that has any complexity or interest, if they're not asking me follow-up questions to clarify what I mean by certain parts of what I'm talking, I know that they don't understand what I'm saying. One of the biggest myths we have in our culture, one of the biggest illusions that we live under, is that by us saying something means that that's what other people hear. And that's completely false. And you can understand why, for many reasons. Number one is that the terms we use have specific meanings for us based on our experience, our education, our culture, and other things. And we assume that by using a word or a term or a phrase, that what we intend to mean by that is what people are receiving. And in most cases, it's not true. And that's why it's such a great myth. Because we have this solid assumption that we talk and people understand or get what we mean. And the truth is that in most cases, in 99% of the time, they're interpreting it into their own words, thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and otherwise. Meaning it's something very different than what we intended. So the first thing we need to understand is that it's critical in a dynamic discourse to ask follow-up questions of people that are speaking so that first, before we lay a judgment, before we allow our beliefs to rule out completely what they're saying, that at least we understand what they are actually saying. And if you're not asking follow-up questions with the intent of understanding, you're never going to get there. Which leads us to the second critical skill or technique for communicating. And that skill is agreeing on terms. And this is something that goes to that point of how words can have different meanings. So when you get into a dynamic discourse, and it can be heated perhaps if it's that kind of conversation, or it can be stimulating if you're throwing around ideas, it's very easy for the same word to have multiple meanings, and so that we think we're really creating something special, that we're getting buy-in, that we're getting agreement, when in fact we have 6 people or 8 people leaving the room with 8 different definitions and meanings of what's going on. The second critical thing is it's very inefficient. And what I encourage you to do is think of the key and critical terms that you'll be using in your dynamic discourse conversation. And the first thing that you want to do is define those very specifically so that when they're used throughout the remaining part of the meeting or conversation, we know precisely what people mean when they use one of these critical or key terms. And then as you're talking, if more terms come up that become important to the solution or the conversation, that you take one step back to take two steps forward, meaning you take the time to clarify and define what we all mean when we use that term before we move forward. And if you apply these techniques with discipline, I guarantee you're going to have much better conversations, and you might just solve world peace and cure cancer. Good luck.